listener production.
Hi, Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. It might sound like science fiction, but like it or not, a US startup is changing the future of fertility. Its advanced embryo testing is now letting patients not only screen for disease, but appearance and IQ.
What scientists have basically done over time is they've established the genetic basis for a huge host of traits, including intelligence. What's I think so interesting is parents can make relative choices amongst their embryos to choose something like IQ.
While many couples are ready to cough up thousands for the tests, others have raised questions of ethics and whether we should even be picking genetic traits. That chat with the founder of the Silicon Valley startup is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Dan Mullins. It's Thursday, the 28th of August.
Hey Helen, and to you listening. There's been another school shooting in the United States. 2 children were killed and 7 people injured when a gunman shot through a window at a Catholic school mass in Minneapolis. The gunman fired a rifle from the church's parking lot through stained glass windows, hitting children praying in pews. The shooter, named as 23-year-old Robin Westman, then turned the gun on himself. Here's Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara.
This was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshipping.
17 other people were injured, 14 of them children, 2 remain in a critical condition. Here's Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey.
And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace.
The New York Times is reporting a video with possible links to the shooter with an apparent manifesto was uploaded to YouTube and then deleted 20 hours before the shooting.
The manhunt continues for sovereign citizen gunman Dezi Freeman, who remains at large in Victorian bushland after he allegedly killed 2 police officers. Freeman is believed to be heavily armed with several firearms after he opened fire on a group of 10 police officers who were conducting a search warrant resulting in the killings of Detective Leading Senior Constable Neil Thompson and Senior Constable Vadim Devort, who were both shot. The gunman was previously known to police after having his driver's license taken away, prompting Freeman to launch a Supreme Court challenge, with authorities also revealing a court cancelled his firearms licenses as well. The gunman claimed he was a target of police harassment.
Weather conditions are expected to worsen in the search area with up to 1 metre of snow forecasted for the region over the next couple of days. However, locals say that wouldn't be a problem for the gunman, who is believed to be an experienced bushman. One local in the town says Freeman knew how to look after himself out in the bush and that he could show up anywhere, with others adding he was like a new-age Ned Kelly who knows the area even in tough conditions. Expert survivalists have told the media that Freeman could possibly survive for weeks out in the remote bushland, and authorities have advised locals to stay inside.
The US government is tightening the rules on visas for students, cultural exchange visitors, and members of the media. The Trump administration has undergone a major crackdown on immigration since taking office, and it's now targeting international students, exchange workers, and foreign journalists who will have to apply to extend their stay if they want to remain in the United States once their program or project is complete.
The new changes will impact F visas for international students, J visas that allow visitors on cultural exchange programs to work in the US, and I visas for the media. They'll all now face a fixed time period they'll be allowed to stay in the US, and student and exchange visa periods will be limited to 4 years, with the new changes possibly impacting around 1.6 million international students and about 355,000 exchange visitors.
The visa for journalists, including foreign correspondents, at the moment can last years. It'd be changed to just 240 days, and in the case of Chinese nationals, 90 days. Visa holders can apply for extensions. Just days ago, the Trump administration said it was reviewing the visas of 55 million people living in the United States. And you might remember earlier this year, Trump did try and block Harvard University from enrolling international students, but was unsuccessful, many of whom would be on the F visas for international students as the Ivy League school and the US government battle it out over federal funding.
And there's a new twist in the rise of AI and the impacts it's having on the environment here in Australia. A new study by Sydney Water has found the data centres that drive AI are soaking up massive amounts of drinking water.
As a comparison, our system here, ranked as one of the most energy efficient in the world, uses about 1.5 megawatts of power, which in comparative terms is that of a small suburb.
Mark Stickles, CEO of Pawsey Supercomputing Centre, talking to the ABC there. So data centres use the water to draw heat away from their servers, and they use cooling towers to do so. And that means huge amounts of water are lost through evaporation.
And it's drinking water. Australia has more than 260 data centres, and that number is expected to explode over the next 20 years. Sydney Water expects a quarter of the city's drinking water will be used to cool data centres over the next 10 years. You can expect the same impact right across Australia.
And it was the night of nights for politicians with the Parliament's annual midwinter ball taking place in Canberra. The nation's leaders gathered, including Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Opposition Leader Susan Lee, and Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Among the crowd were journalists, ambassadors, influential figures, and even former Australian of the Year Dylan Alcott.
In the past, many politicians have used the ball to make political statements, and this year, a few Greens MPs showed their support for Palestine in the form of jewellery, and Jackie Lambie, who's been vocal about the cost of living pressures facing Australians, wore a $129 dress compared to some of the designer brands on show, with dresses starting at around $700 to $800. Good on her.
Yeah, it is always a bit strange to see our politicians dressed up in gowns instead of their usual, suits and professional looks that we see all the time. But I do quite like looking through all the albums that come out every year. But that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up is Tara's Deep Dive, looking into how advanced embryo testing is now letting patients screen for IQ. Have a listen to that coming up next.
We've long heard about genetic testing to help screen for diseases, even ancestry. But what about for your looks or intelligence? Well, a Silicon Valley startup's offering to do just that, offering couples undergoing IVF a chance to test their embryos for illness, but also other hereditary traits.
A genetic optimization software that helps parents give their children the best possible start in life. The first time a company has openly partnered with a couple to help them optimize their embryos based on intelligence. You can explore your future child's health, appearance, and even their well-being.
That voice was the brains behind the startup, Nucleus Founder Kian Sadeghi. Kian, thanks very much for joining me on the briefing today. We've all heard of genetic testing, but you're taking it a step further than the norm. What can you tell me?
So, we have what's called a Nucleus Embryo, or most recently actually we launched a Nucleus IVF Plus. So IVF Plus is based in end-to-end IVF experience for patients. It basically is IVF built for what we call genetic optimization with sort of a human touch. And so basically patients can use Nucleus technology, both adult DNA testing to make sure they don't pass down any hereditary diseases, things like cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs to their children. And then they can also use our embryo selection platform or our genetic optimization platform called Nucleus Embryo to basically pick their embryo based off what's most important to them, which different parents, prioritize different things, and that's really up to the parent to choose.
And what kinds of things can parents choose from that? Is it traits? I think I read about intelligence. That's really interesting.
There's a huge range of different traits and diseases that someone can provide analysis on. And so, people probably know pretty intuitively something like height is like very genetic, for example. Something like, let's say, extroversion is actually not that genetic, or depression or skin cancer is not that genetic. So obviously different things have different degrees of genetics. The things that it's important to understand is that DNA is never destiny. I think sometimes people think they have this idea that if they look at someone's DNA, they're going to say, oh, the person's going to have this IQ and this height. Well, of course not. That's just impossible. And the reason why you already know that intuitively that's impossible is because even something like height, for example, obviously what you eat, how you're raised, basically nurture, if you will, the entirety of nurture shapes your eventual height. You actually saw this post-industrial revolution, for example. You saw Persians, my people, my parents are from Iran. They grew, I think, 8 inches. And by the way, we needed those 8 inches, okay, after the industrial revolution. And so, basically DNA is just one tool of many tools that parents are going to use, to basically, in this case, maybe reduce a cancer risk, like, breast cancer incidence, diabetes, schizophrenia, or things like, height, for example, make a baby slightly taller or shorter. Obviously, the most important decision whenever you think about genetic optimization is who you pick as a partner. There's like the memes of like, I want the 6'2", like finance guy, right? Like obviously once you pick that dude, your kids are going to be pretty tall and no amount of genetic optimization, can change that. So again, I really think people should start thinking about kind of nucleus embryo and embryonic selection, genetic optimization, more as just one of many tools in a parent's toolkit to help give their child the best start in life.
And can you talk me through the IQ side? That really fascinates me. How does that exactly work when it comes to genetics, IQ, and screening for IQ?
So IQ is basically, if you think about, the genetic base of different things, IQ is very similar to what I was describing as height, in that obviously DNA is not destiny, right? It's like you're not going to look at, baby's DNA and be like, oh, this baby's going to be smart, this baby's going to be dumb. That's just not at all how it works. But what scientists have basically done over time is they've established the genetic basis for a huge host of traits, including intelligence. And, what's I think so interesting is parents can make relative choices amongst their embryos to choose something like IQ. But honestly, many parents, I would say, first and foremost, they go for disease. The IQ model is very modest. It can explain maybe a couple IQ points. But I think patients are mostly interested in things like diabetes and cancers, for example. And even something like IQ is just one small part of what actually makes someone somebody. And so I think it's interesting, it's notable, and people definitely take a look at it. But it's just one of many things that Nucleus provides.
Yeah, I think it's just the newest thing. We have in Australia, we've heard about kind of testing for disease, which is brilliant and obviously well utilised. People want to be able to make sure, particularly for a range of really debilitating diseases, it can be particularly helpful. How accurate can you test for something like height and IQ? Like, how does that part actually work?
So for something like height, it's like a couple inches here. So like basically you'd expect your embryos to be maybe 2-3 inches different in height, for example. Obviously it depends because the embryos are like a random combination of mom and dad. Also, obviously it depends on who you marry. So obviously if you marry someone really short or you marry someone really tall, as people already know intuitively, tall people have tall kids. It's like siblings basically, right? The difference in height between siblings is not that great. And so that's why it's like an optimization tool, basically, right? I think, again, people sometimes think that genetics is end all be all. Genetics is never end all be all. It is just another tool that parents are going to use to, help their child.
So we're seeing this for, obviously, disease. We're seeing it now for things like height, IQ. Can the tech yet, or do you see it in the future ever being able to be used for things like, other kinds of traits for athletic ability or finding the next Van Gogh or LeBron?
I think finding the next Van Gogh is impossible.
Damn.
But I don't know, Tara. That'd be pretty cool, though. I think if you could look at someone's DNA, turn the Van Gogh. It's actually interesting because sometimes people ask these questions, and I think it's interesting because people have a perception, I think, that's in two extremes in genetics. People think of either basically what I call genetic determinism, which is basically you have this DNA marker, you have these million markers, you're going to be this certain way. Or they think genetics is basically completely irrelevant and it has no impact on anything and it's just like completely, like everyone's completely like a blank slate almost. But, it's really interesting to me because in reality, and everybody knows this, like if you go to school, for example, right, you might be like, oh, that person's more athletic built than me, that person's taller than me, that person's better than me in math, but I'm better than them in, English and history. We've all had that experience. Or, oh, this person's so much more charming and extroverted. Life is so multifaceted, right? You cannot possibly reduce a human to its genetic material. By that point, you can't ever look at someone's DNA and be like Van Gogh or LeBron James or something, because the amount of time and effort and passion and the number of variables and factors that created their life, goes well so beyond DNA. And, people know that intuitively, again, even siblings that share 50% of their DNA. How many times you talk to siblings, you're like, these people are completely different. Even, by the way, identical siblings sometimes, you're like, wow, these people are really different, even though they have the exact same DNA. And actually, that's what scientists use. They use identical siblings often to see how genetic things are. And then you still find that there's actually very strong material environmental components, even for something like height.
So it's not, I can't come to you and say, I want to breed a legion of super children. Unfortunately, Elon Musk will be devastated.
Musk will be devastated. Yeah, there's no, I don't know.
So just walk me through then, if I was a parent, say I came to you, obviously we've gone through the process of screening for disease, and if I was interested in this aspect around IQ, what would it look like?
Yeah, let's walk through this. So basically we have IVF Plus, which is again, this kind of a new IVF option that is designed for parents to have their healthiest child. They're really designed to give their kid the best start in life. You would schedule a consultation call with us. We learn a little bit more about what's your timeline, where are you based. We learn a little bit more about what's your budget. And then depending on all these variables, we actually match you to basically the best clinic and the best physician. So we are building out an exclusive network of what we call IVF Plus clinics, which are clinics that offer basically this most advanced version of IVF, which is built around genetic optimization, not just kind of a parent having a child, but having, their healthiest child, trying to give their child the best start in life. And so then the patient will basically start off with our adult DNA testing, which is testing the really advanced genetic testing in mom and dad, which looks at actually 2,000 different diseases, which to my knowledge is one of the highest, if not the highest in the entire industry. And then after they do that testing, we identify any rare genetic markers, things like Tay-Sachs or cystic fibrosis or PKU. These are conditions that you may have heard of that sometimes a parent may inadvertently pass down to their child that didn't impact their own health. We then designed the testing protocol for embryos. So what's unique about our approach is that because we do adult testing, we're able to do more targeted testing to embryos. We do genetic analysis for diseases and traits, things from like height and IQ all the way to cancers. In the embryo, we do then the IQ and height and cancers, et cetera. So basically, you'll be able to see for like IQ or height specifically in our Nucleus embryo software platform, you'll be able to see basically the predicted relative difference between each of the embryos for both height and for IQ. And at that point, they get access to what we call Nucleus Embryo, which is genetic optimization software. So parents basically will have, their embryos, and they can basically easily compare them and basically pick off what is most important to the couple, which really varies to couples. During this entire experience, we actually have genetic counselors and IVF specialists walking you through every step. So IVF can be a kind of emotional and complex process for many patients, and we recognize that. And we want to help these patients and help guide parents on how they want to pick their future child. At that point, it's time to implant the embryo. The woman gets pregnant, and then before you know it, 9 months later, you have a nucleus baby.
Where do you see this going? So, we've got disease, height, IQ. What other things can be told by a person's genes that, we might one day be able to test for?
I think it's more like the models are going to continue to improve and get better. There's never going to be a point where it's like, oh, now we can make like the as you said, like the super child. That's not how these things work. It's going to keep improving. I always think of genetic optimization as another tool. It is not end all be all. The entire IVF process is important. Now you're just giving patients, I think, greater agency, greater choice, and greater delight, and greater assurance too that God forbid if their mother died of breast cancer, if their grandfather had Alzheimer's, right? God forbid that they can, at the life's conception, if they can pick basically an embryo, their baby, with a lower Alzheimer's disease risk, so that 80 years from now, 40 years from now, whatever, the baby doesn't get Alzheimer's. Right, so it doesn't have the same fate as its grandfather. That to me is that's like a very beautiful thing that I think will get lost in that so much of the optimization parents will do. It will actually play out on a timeline that someone might not even necessarily appreciate, that their parents simply ran one test one time in their life and on a piece of software just picked a different baby, and then suddenly that baby maybe potentially didn't get cancer 30 years from now. I think that's such a beautiful thing, and such a thing that any parent who's having a child is going to want to get access to.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who's got both grandparents with Alzheimer's on each side, so I can definitely understand the benefits for, being able to look for these kinds of things and just having another layer of education for your toolkit, really. Now, this science, or really any tech advancements like this, they don't come without critics, and often you'll get people with for religious reasons that don't like it, others that don't like the idea of kind of being able to look at or pick people based on traits and things like that. What do you say to the critics?
One thing I've been very grateful to experience is I've spoken to hundreds of IVF couples at this point. And time again, what I find is these are just normal people who maybe not by choice in some cases, actually, maybe by choice in other cases, but maybe not by choice, have to do IVF. And every parent just wants the same thing. They want to have a healthy, beautiful child. That's it. And so I think sometimes the kind of theory of this far outpaces the ground truth, which is there are parents who maybe even saved up a lot of money to do IVF, to have a child, and they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm already doing IVF, right? I have to go through this entire process. It's expensive. It's emotional. It takes a lot, especially in the woman's body. And why would I not use technology that now exists to give my child the best start in life? So that's why I always go back to, I always think about the patient. I also think about my cousin. My cousin, she unfortunately, she went to sleep one day and she passed away. She died in her sleep. And, my dad's a physician. I asked my dad, how does that happen? He said, bad genetics. And I remember thinking, now, using Nucleus IVF Plus, maybe we could stop what happened to my cousin from happening to any child in the world. And to me, that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, really powerful reason to kind of get into the kind of work that you're doing. I really appreciate your time today, Kian, and thanks for joining me on The Briefing.
Thank you so much, Tara. I appreciate it.
That was Nucleus founder Kian Sadeghi speaking with me there, and that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.